Welcome back to another day of, the Israel-Palestine conflict and disaster. We're on day 6. Also, welcome to what is Inflation Day. Inflation Day is really important in America and actually, quite frankly, around the world, mostly because it determines the direction and trajectory and pace or speed, whatever you want to call it, of rates in America. It's worth noting that the Federal Reserve often tips their hand on a CPI release, since they often know about it well before markets do. Often tips their hand to the media. Not always, but I find it very interesting that the Wall Street Journal just this morning is running a piece saying what to watch for in inflation report. A mild reading could keep Fed on hold. And that's really interesting because there's been some confusion about, is the Fed going to hike or not? Now you've got the Wall Street Journal suggesting, quote, a tame inflation report on Thursday would likely kill the prospect of an interest rate increase by the Federal Reserve at its next meeting. This is what the Federal Reserve does. The Federal Reserve likes to make very clear expectations. Hey, if we get a mild report, we're not going to hike again. If we get a strong report, we'll hike again. They do this on purpose because the Federal Reserve, ever since the failures of the past Feds, has decided we want to be a little bit more clear with the economy. So we'll speak very clearly. While we can't crystal ball what the future will bring, we will set expectations for what we will do based on what occurs. Bloomberg itself thinks that an upside surprise, of course, the inverse, could boost expectations for a final rate hike this year. Now, this I think is interesting because they're not saying could increase the odds of higher rates, which could be multiple rate hikes. They're saying there's one more, maybe. And if we get a hot CPI report now, maybe we'll get one more hike. But we're really debating whether or not we're going to have one more here. It looks like economists right now, you have a few different expectations. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the expectations. So you've got month over month. You want to write these down so you can compare them pretty quickly. I'll obviously bring them up the second they come out. But let's just say this will be very interesting and fascinating. CPI month over month expected to be 0.3. CPI month over month core minus food and energy expected to be 0.3 as well. So that's all you really have to remember right now is 0.3. You want to hear me go 0.2 or 0.1 or 0. That would be great. And then, of course, you got headline numbers 3.6 for the year over year. That's somewhat been driven up by energy. And then a core year over year 4.1. It'll be great to see this come in under 4. I personally would lean towards the under on these numbers, mostly because of the amount of reading that we're doing on earnings calls of companies that are suggesting, that we can't raise prices anymore, basically. In fact, one of the things I've been regularly talking about on the channel is this idea that producers of goods and services might end up having higher costs, but I think their ability to pass those higher costs on to their consumers is almost completely gone. I think the expectations are very, very low that businesses are actually able to pass on all of the cost increases they have anymore. That was a COVID thing, and it was possible then. Don't see it as being possible anymore now, mostly because there is there's a serious belief amongst the consumer that, you know what, we need to potentially really think about pulling back here and started to save a little bit of moolah. Imagine that. The consumer saying they want to save some moolah. Anyway, so where does that leave us now? Well, where that leaves us is 3 minutes away from the release of CPI. 3 minutes. In 3 minutes, we will have the CPI release, and I'll be going through the report, and then we'll get into updates on the latest on Israel, which, just to give you a heads up, Blinken is going to be in the Middle East, Secretary of State, and we are going to get, basically, he's going to meet the leader of Palestine. He's going to meet he's going to meet Netanyahu, and we'll get some interesting negotiating and posturing by the Secretary of State. I always think it's interesting when they come to a region during these times, because they'll probably also end up meeting with Saudi Arabia. They'll meet with Egypt. And I think a lot of countries are going to stick their hands out and go, well, you want to send the Palestinians to Egypt? Pay for it. So we'll see. We'll talk more about Israel after we get through the CPI report. CPI report, again, will be out in 2 minutes. We are 2 minutes away. So it's worth noting as well that on the month-over-month survey for core, which is generally the most important one, the month-over-month survey for core has 68 economists estimate. And of the 68 estimates, the average estimate is 0.26. The high estimate is 0.4. So we could come in 0.1 higher based on the high estimate. And the low estimate is actually 0, which would be coming down 0.3. So the under here is substantially larger in terms of a belief than the upper. So here's your average, this 2.6, but it's being listed as a 0.3 because of the median read. And you've only got really a few people over here at 0.4, with more people actually leaning towards the 0 direction, which is interesting. Anyway, so we'll see what happens. Well, wait a second. That's not necessarily true, because these are numbers of estimates. So you have fewer people on 0 over here. I guess when you look at the low versus the high, if you take the range, the low versus the high, the low is substantially lower than the high is, away from where the estimate is. That's the better way to put it. So we'll see. This will be out now in about 20 seconds. We're 20 seconds away from CPI, which is a perfect place to mention, check out the new Verse Pro courses. Prices go up tomorrow night. If you don't do it now, and if you're anything like me, you're going to forget. So you may as well tab open right now, meetkevin.com. At the top, you got HouseHack, the ETFs, the newsletter, everything you need to know about Meet Kevin's over there, and of course, those new Verse Pro courses. So CPI numbers come in at month-over-month core matches 0.3. Headline beats a little, or comes in higher, comes in at 0.4. Not great, probably because of energy prices, but that's okay. We could look through that. CPI year over year comes in 1 point hot, 3.7 versus 3.6. CPI core year over year comes in at 4.1. We didn't end up getting a miss to the downside. It would have been really nice to get a miss to the downside. We kind of got a match on expectations here. That's interesting. The economists are getting more accurate with their numbers. It used to be that as we would get inflation coming in, as you can see on screen here, we had a lot more volatility. Look at the estimate on here. This is the gray line. Your estimates were pretty volatile relative to where inflation was. Even over here in 2020 when this was beginning, whereas now they're starting to align. The estimates are really starting to come in a little closer to where we have reality. Core, same. Let's see here. Okay, U.S. futures slightly falter with S&P 500 and NASDAQ pairing some of the gains. Let's go get the actual report and see where this what we have here. So CPI report. Also getting updates here on Wall Street's outlook, and so we'll see if this is considered a tame inflation report for the Federal Reserve to pause, and we'll go through some of the details of the actual report. I always think the CPI reports are pretty entertaining to go through, and then getting individuals' reactions are always fun too. But that headline beat is almost certainly due to the fluctuations in oil prices that we've seen. We also got initial claims here that just came out, 209 versus 210 expected. Continuing claims, 1.702 versus the 1.676. I mean, that's pretty normal. However, that 0.4 on that CPI headline might end up leading a little bit to some selling, maybe yields pushing up a tiny little bit here, just because it's not the weak side that we were hoping for. And shelter inflation being reported by the BLS is up. That's not good. One of the big things we're looking for in inflation is that shelter is going to roll over, and that by rolling over, we're going to see a big disinflationary force. It doesn't look like shelter is really proving to be that disinflationary force just yet. And so a lot of people are like, where is it? When's it coming? All right, let's see here. So the index for shelter was the largest contributor. And we've seen this for the last like 6 reports here. The index for shelter was the largest contributor in the monthly items increase, accounting for over half of the increase. So as long as shelter is rolling over, that means we still have work to do on housing. But when is it actually going to come in lower, these owners equivalent rents? Major increase in gasoline was also a major increase to the monthly increase. Okay, energy costs. While the major energy component for indices were mixed in September, the energy index rose 1.5% over the month. Food rose just 0.2%. That's pretty benign there for food. That's nominal. In September, as it did the previous month, index for all items, less food and energy, rose 0.3%, the same as in August. The index which increased in September, or the indices which increased in September, include rent, owner's equivalent rent, lodging away from home. Really, the hotels still pushing higher numbers here. Motor vehicle insurance, recreational, personal care, and new vehicles. Wow. 2-year yield now back over 5%. And 10-year pretty stable around 4.59%. This would be called a touch higher than expected, still trending in the right direction. And what we'll do now is we'll go through some of the big categories, and then we'll go through some of the smaller categories, and we'll get to Israel and the latest there. So what we're looking for here, shelter. Let's see. Motor vehicle insurance increased 1.3%. Oops, there we go. After rising 2.4% the prior month. Recreational, personal care, new vehicles, and housing furnishings also increased in September. Medical care rose 0.2%. Hospital services over 1.5%. Not great. Prescription drugs fell 0.7%. Used cars and trucks fell 2.5%. Apparel down 0.8%. Communications index unchanged. It really appears to be almost only housing, but we did have some increases like those airfares. So we're going to go through the exact numbers here in a moment. Let me get that. Hold on. There we go. Okay, let's get the BLS detailed sections, and we'll be able to see exactly what each category is coming in. Again, a little hotter than expected on that headline. Looks like we got a match on the inside, the core numbers, though it is leading to a little bit of a drop here on the S&P 500 futures. And let's see here. Half of the reading and prices came from housing. This has been the case for some time now. Exactly. I've already seen that. It's just Wall Street reacting. All right. Here's the detailed categories. Try to beat Wall Street. All right. So what do you have here? On the right side, you have the seasonally adjusted August to September numbers. I like to start at the back because that's where services are. So financial services. Oh, here we go. Only coming in at 0.1. 0.1 for financial services. It's been deflating here for a bit with negative reads. Apparel services other than laundry, minus 1%. Miscellaneous personal services, though, 1.1. That's hot. Wait, what contributed to that? Oh, like what? No, there's no way. Well, I don't understand how miscellaneous personal services could come in at a hot 1.1%. But these internal categories here, I mean, it must have been legal services that they're not showing. That's a little weird. Personal services here, not breaking it down completely, but 0.6%. That's weird. Okay, and then you've got these falling ones here, negative 0.2, negative 3. These are telephone services, internet services. Postage stamps went up 0.5%. Daycare, preschool, 0.9. That's pretty hot. But then again, you did just go back to school. But then again, that's seasonally adjusted, so that shouldn't really matter. So that's pretty hot. Admission to sporting events up 7.7. I wonder if we can blame Taylor Swift for this. Stop going to the football games. You're causing the prices to go up. Yeah, admissions to games and stuff here up 3%. Photography up 2%. Probably also Taylor Swift. Let's see. Okay, Wall Street here. Somebody was pushing down yields immediately before CPI print. They got caught out when the number showed faster than expected inflation. Oh, only, I mean, slightly faster. Let's see here. Yeah, also this number not consistent with 2% inflation, right? Because when you get to 0.3%, you've really got 3.6% inflation. So we've got some work to do here. Although I want to calculate exactly what that number is, which we'll do once we get the some more of the detailed numbers here. Intracity mass transit up. Okay, let's get some more of the big numbers here. Public transport, 0.5%. There's that motor vehicle insurance, 1.3%. You've got vehicle repair at 0.2. It's fine. Health insurance plummeting, 3.5%. Thank God, that stuff's too expensive. Gardening, 5%. Why? Water sewer collection, 0.2. Tenant and household insurance, 0.9. Owner's equivalent rent, still 0.6. Why? Why did it accelerate again? It's actually not a good sign because you wanted this to decline and stop going up. But the fact that it's trending up again, this 0.6 is not good. It's like the Fed's trying to crimp housing and get these prices to come down, but people are so locked into these low mortgage rates. It's tough. You don't have enough housing. Rent of shelter back up again, goes from 0.3 to 0.6. That's not good. Lodging away from home. How do you get 0.36 here? These numbers are not fantastic. The last thing you want is these housing numbers to start running away on you because they create so much of a push up. I mean, really what that says is if you stripped out housing and you got to a super core, you probably had like negative inflation because this is a big fat contributor. I mean, you're over 30 something percent I think it's about 34% just for shelter. Yeah, here it is, 34.7% just for shelter. That's a huge contributor to CPI. Okay, personal care products, 0.4, also not great. Wine away from home, come on, man, 1.2%. Alcohol away from home, 0.9, not good. Alcoholic beverages in general, up 0.8. Come on, folks, lower the demand here. Toys, -5. I mean, that's good, -0.5. We like to see that. Pet products, back up again, not great, 0.6. A little hot over here. Don't like to see that. And they were finally coming down. There's the used cars, down 2.5%. You've got -1.5% on car parts. New vehicles up 0.3. Pretty nominal, not a big deal. We can get through that. If housing were coming in lower, these numbers would be fine. -0.8 on apparel. Appliances, -1.4. That's actually this line right here. And all items less food energy here coming in at 0.3%. All right, so let's do some numbers here. And now we know what's going on. It's housing's coming up again a little bit, which is not fantastic. We got to see that stop. And all right, let me see here. Let's do the actual math on these numbers here. So what do we have? We have, in the meantime, here's Nick T's tweet. Nick T tweeting, his suggestion is that you invest into HouseHack. Go to househack.com to invest with the fundraise closing for the year soon. Read the offering circular on househack.com. Core CPI rose 0.32. Yeah, it's not great. Remember that we had to round down here. We were looking for 2.6, and we ended up getting 0.32. It's because of that darn housing number. Annualized 6-month rate edged down to 3.6. 12-month ticked down to 4.15. 3-month annualized rate, this is the annualized, where they multiply it by 12, did rise. Not good. There's that annualized. We want to see that come down, although it is volatile, right? I mean, that 3-month change is never a straight line. So you could probably look past this. You could probably still pause in November for the Fed rate hike. And as you pause in November, you're just going to hold out for a December rate hike. You're just going to kick the can down the road once more. And that'll help you, get some more data in November, because the Fed meeting in November is a couple weeks before the November CPI report. Now, I'll keep this in mind, the schedule of releases. Let's pull that really quick just to give you the November date, so you have the dates. So the dates to remember: October 13th, Noob vs. Pro courses go up. Email us at at staff@meetkevin.com if you have questions. November 1st, HouseHack raise expires. And then November 14th, we have CPI. So October CPI is November 14th, but the Fed meets on November 1st. And then you have a labor report that you want to pay attention to. The labor report is usually the first Friday of every month. And in this case, it'll be November 3rd, which is the first Friday of November. Okay, let's get some more detail, and then we're going to jump into more Israel coverage here. But I want to see some more reaction from Wall Street and suits. First, 10-year Treasury yields up about 1 basis point now, and the 2-year is up 7 basis points. Not good. That, unfortunately, makes the yield curve more inverted. So all of this uninverting that we're doing, we're going backwards now again. Great. Come on, man. This is just exhausting. Fed rate monitor tool. We are at expectations for, this might take another few minutes to update, but we'll look anyway. Expectations for a rate hike now sitting at about 10% for November, and December still sitting at about 29%. Okay, let's see here. Some of the other things. But let's see here. Bearish over the summer, but now's the time to buy treasuries. We'll see about that. The effect CPI. Let's see. Monthly shelter reaccelerated to 0.65% in September. Everything else in CPI. Wow. There it is. Everything else in CPI rose 0.07%. That's less than 0.1%. But thanks to shelter still being hot, you got a read of 0.65% on basically, or a read of 0.32% once you factor in housing. So it's really, this is purely housing here. And if the Federal Reserve believes that housing is going to roll over, we're Gucci here. But if inflation doesn't roll over in housing, it's a problem. Big problems. So take a peek here. That's where we're going to go for Israel in a moment. We've got 0.3% on Tesla. We've got flat here on Enphase, 0.3% to the downside there for Tesla, though it appears to be trying to recover. We've got Apple up about 7 basis points. NASDAQ's trying to go positive here, 0.13%. Now, I want to tell you what I warned about yesterday, something important to pay attention to. Yesterday, I said that if we get a slightly hot inflation report, what I'm most interested in paying attention to is how the market responds. If the market goes up after a slightly hot inflation report and closes the day way up, then it's a sign the market is convinced. They are convinced that inflation is gone. And not only are they convinced inflation is gone, but they know that peak yields are going to be in then. And so the question is the market going to care about this slight tick up over here in the 3-month annualized change? And that depends. It depends what rents are doing. And so if you look at Apartment List or Zillow rents, or Redfin rents or whatever, it appears that rent trends should be bringing rental inflation to flat for year over the year to slightly negative. Consider, for example, Zillow is showing that right now rents should be negative year over year. I'm going to show you this. I'm going to show you California, and then I want to see if I can get the entire United States. Does it do that? No, it doesn't. I'm just going to pull this up, and I'll show you this chart. This is very, very important. Okay, and I'll show you how you could look this up yourself, because it's easy to just say, oh, go do it. But if I don't show you how to do it, you're not going to do it. Okay, so I want you to see this. Okay. And let's throw in a state. There we go. Okay. So I'll bring it back to showing you how to get there from Google for this rent estimate. And then this is what you have to look at in detail. So let's pull this up. Let's go here. Oh, oops. These are the new Verse Pro courses with prices going up on Friday. Oh, look, you can now hit show more courses to see all the ones we added. We got some new ones. Sorry. What you actually want to Google is this: Zillow rental market trends, and then put a state in. Okay, so whatever state you want to put it in. We'll do a few in a moment. But look at this. So this shows you that year over year rents are down $152. Look at this chart though. So here's what you have to understand. This blue line is last year. There's a lag in this housing data by about 6 months. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Damn it. What does that show? That actually shows that rents were lower a year and 6 months ago than where they were 6 months ago. What does that do? It drives rental inflation up. As soon as this flips, we'll get a big fat negative read. Folks, think about this. Imagine we get to January or March, okay? January or March, where these rental numbers flip, okay? What's January, March? Well, 1, 2, 3. Let's count back from January now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, what's the difference between those two numbers? Well, the difference between those two numbers is about $200. Okay, so 200 divided by 3,100. That's a negative 6.4%. Imagine if those housing numbers come in with a negative read. Right now, if you take out housing, inflation, core inflation rose 0.07%. Nothing. It's literally less than the target. 0.07% for inflation times 12 is literally inflation coming in at less than 1% per year. I'll say it again. Inflation right now outside of housing is less than 1% per year. When the Federal Reserve had inflation at 1.75%, they were like, we need to print more. Inflation's too low. We could face deflation. This is bad. Okay? Inflation is now annualizing on a core basis without housing at less than 1%. And okay, well, what is housing going to do? Well, at least in California, it's negative. Now, I know people are going to go, well, that's because everybody's trying to leave California. Whatever. So let's put in Florida. Let's see. I haven't done it yet. Let's compare it live. We'll do it live. So, look at that. In Florida, it's much more flat. So that'll average things out. So in Florida, year over year, if we go back 6 months, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we're lower. Oh, how interesting. Look at that. You go lower and then you go slightly above. So that'll probably flatten out. Let's go Texas. So that'll probably be a 0 weight because you're slightly below. So, of course, Texas is negative $69. But anyway, look at that. You're going to get that same bubble because go back 6 months. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. Rents are higher than where they were last month, 6 months ago. And so you're going to get a negative push. Let's do another one. Let's do Nevada. Negative $85. Oh, look at that. Look at how much it ends up coming down. That's great. That's the housing disinflation we're expecting to see. Do Utah. So then you do this for the whole oh, that's a big drop. Look at that plummet. I mean, 2023 rents are plummeting over here in Utah. Absolutely dropping off a cliff for Utah. Very interesting to pay attention to. Let's do Arizona. Average rental price, Arizona, 65. Also lower. Everything lower for 23. So once you average this out for the entire United States and you wait for that 6-month delay to go by, what are you going to get? Well, you're going, New York's coming in still a little higher, although it's converging over here, which is a little more flattening. But that's interesting. New York rental market a little hot. So you have to balance that out with like California or otherwise. Let's try another one. Let's do Georgia. Anyway, you can start doing this yourself. But the point is, the national expectation. Oh, I wonder if I could just get the national average from Zillow. Negative 88 in Georgia. Let's just try United States. I don't know that it'll let me do that, which is stupid. It should let me merge this all together. But anyway, when that's all merged together, we will be in a place where we'll probably have substantial shelter deflation. We've just been talking about that for over a year. We just don't have it yet. So we're waiting for it. Maybe Redfin can give us national rent market data. We're going to get into Israel here in just a moment. Rent tracker. All right, here we go. What does the rent tracker say? Rental tracker asking rents flattened in September amid growing apartment supply. Rents are flattening out after going on a roller coaster ride during the pandemic. Median asking price rose. This is the asking price. Rose 0.4% in September. 6 straight month in which rents were little changed. This is nationwide. Flat. The more flat it is, the better for inflation. Yeah, these are the percent changes here. You really want this to come in as low as possible because that's going to help drive that inflation down. So here asking rents, year-over-year changes. You can see they're all stabilizing down. But again, look at where we are now. We have to go back 6 months. 6 months is over here in March. And you can see the numbers are still way higher year-over-year than where we are over here on the right. Okay, so let me take a look at what the suits are saying now. And we also should have some numbers like the 10-year, 2-year inversion. You should see a big plummet on the right side of this line as the yield curve, oh God, yeah, deepens again. Come on. Just want this to be done. Let me look, and I'll pull it up and I'll show it to you, but I want to look at the 5-year break even as well. Let's see what the inflation expectations are. Now the bond market's pricing in. I call this pretty stable. The 5-year break even inflation rate, pretty stable. We go to the 5-year forward, which is how much we expect inflation to be in 5 years, and then 5 years out. It's still on the elevated side, but certainly lower than where it has been. And let's get the Fed term rate here. Fed terminal rate expectations, and then we'll see when we start seeing the first rate cut. Expectations now up to 12%. The Fed's going to hike November 1st, so this wasn't super useful in pushing a direction. Although it seems almost certain that they'll just pause and wait. You're now at about 30% for a rate hike for December. And on top of that, we have, let's see, when do we expect the first cuts? Fed term rate, excuse me, did tick up 5.435. And then we'll pull up the world interest rate probability, and this will show us when we're expecting cuts. And that'll take just a second, and we'll show it up on screen. Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, we're going in the direction of cuts, without a doubt. All right. Here it is. Yeah, coming up. Oh, come on. There we go. All right. No, it's not the Noob vs. Pro courses with prices going up on Friday, which, hey, that's tomorrow. So today's Thursday, 11:59 p.m. Email us, staff@meetkevin.com if you have questions. Should start getting answers between 8 and 10 a.m. this morning. What do we have right here? Implied overnight rates. This is where the question mark is, right here. This is what people are worried about. This little stupid, tiny little corner right here. That's it. Oh, I covered it up. That's it. Are we going to go up another 25 or not? After that, folks, it's straight down. By December of next year, we expect rates to be 4.7%, which is still pretty high, actually. Still a little bit of a pisser. It's kind of like, come on, cut the rates more. But it does mean we expect to start cutting rates over here in May. May for rate cuts. Here we are. So we'll see what happens here. Let's go look at some of the other charts. Let me get these up here. so you could see what I saw. All right, here it is. This is the 5-year break-even, 5-year forward. It's you want this to be as close to 2 as possible. It's at 2.4, although it tends to even historically run over that a little bit. Here's the 5-year break-even. You can see it's lower than where it has been. Less stress in the economy on inflation expectations. And then here's your yield curve going back into that inverted direction. Look how close we were to uninverting. Now rotating back down. All right. Let's now listen and get some updates on the Israel-Palestine disaster. Okay. And then as I get other inflation updates or market updates, I'll also be mentioning those. We have, let's see if Nick T wrote his article, by the way. He often does. I will take a peek here. Okay, let's also get some. Oh, yeah, here it is. Although I don't know if that's Nick T's. Let me see. Gabriel Rubin, who's been writing these. Inflation held steady in September, but underlying gains were subdued, providing the Federal Reserve evidence that pressures are slowly abating. Okay, I mean, that's basically a way of saying we're done. Wow. I really believe these news publications, they probably get a heads up from the Fed. Hey, we're pausing. And then they'll write their stories around that. No guarantees, but that is pretty common. So underlying gains were subdued. Monthly gain represented a cooling for, but then again, you had higher energy, blah, blah, blah. We went through all this. Fed eyes labor. Strikes show leverage of employees hasn't gone away. I mean, to some extent, you want employees to have some leverage. We're for example, I'm going through applications right now. Sent out a few emails yesterday already in reply, but we're looking for a full stack developer. If you're interested, send an email to jobs@meetkevin.com. Maybe as many as 2, because it's honestly, it'll probably end up growing to about 3, but it's a pretty big deal. We want to bankrupt BlackRock. So if you have an interest in finance and full stack development, iOS, Android, send an email to jobs@meetkevin.com with your resume. Throw in a video if you want as well. Strikes show worker leverage hasn't gone away. Risks still lying ahead. Okay, we've kind of covered that ad nauseum at this point. All right, so what's the latest? Residents of Gaza are fleeing their homes, but it's basically impossible to get out. My recommendation for the Israel-Palestine crisis was really that if you're there, you try to get to as rural of a place as you can in the Gaza Strip. And I think that's what you have to do. You have to look at it about that way. And your goal is go to somewhere where you think you could be safe, obviously, at least until Israel occupies the land and establishes infrastructure again. That's going to be food, energy, water. That's what you're waiting for. So like this occupation can't come soon enough to minimize the human loss of lives. And here's some of the latest numbers, as you can see up on screen on Fox. 3,000 Israelis wounded, 5,700 Palestinians wounded, 25 Americans killed, 1,200 Palestinians killed, over 1,200 Israelis killed. Gosh, it's a lot of people. It's just terrible. Twin attacks hit Syrian airports. Syria, interesting. Simultaneous airstrikes hit Syria's international airports in Damascus and Aleppo, damaging runways. Blaming Israel for the attacks. Syrian air defenses were responding to the attacks, which rendered both airports non-operational. Wow. That's very interesting. Let's listen to this for a moment.
How are we even to understand this? The message that I bring to Israel is this. You may be strong enough on your own to defend yourself, but as long as America exists, you will never, ever have to. We will always be there by your side.
All this upping the pressure on President Biden to do something about Hamas's biggest sponsor, Iran. A push to refreeze a $6 billion payment to the regime is gaining traction, even among Democrats.
So Team Fox coverage as we get underway now. Alexis McAdams, Peter Doocy, Mark Meredith. But let's start on the border between Gaza and Israel with Mike Tobin, who's got the duties for us this hour. And Mike, where are we now? Hello.
Well, we are in a position where all eyes are now on the Gaza Strip as we get that remarkable statement from Secretary of State Anthony Blinken here in Israel, saying that the Israeli Defense Force may be strong enough to defend itself, but with the U.S. by its side, it will never have to stand alone. As that happens, we're getting the Israeli Defense Force on the record as far as some of the raids, the strikes, commando operations that have taken place in the Gaza Strip. Lieutenant Colonel Richard Heck said the home of Mohammed Abu Shamla was hit, described him as a naval commando operative in the Gaza Strip for the Rafah brigades of Hamas, saying that in the hit on that house, Abu Shamla himself was killed, taken from the house naval equipment and equipment for commando operations underground, as well as other armaments. He described a number of other strikes on Hamas and Islamic Jihad operatives up and down the Gaza Strip. And the IDF, as well as the Israeli government, continues to note connections between Hamas and ISIS, noting that ISIS paraphernalia, ISIS flags were taken from their possession. As he made his statement with Secretary of State Anthony Blinken today, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Hamas should be treated the same as ISIS.
They should be spit out from the community of nations. No leader should meet them. No country should harbor them. And those that do should be sanctioned.
And we continue to witness armor massed on the border of the Gaza Strip, troops on the move. The artillery continues to fire into the Gaza Strip as the Israeli Defense Force has said that the next phase of this operation is ready to begin, a strong hint that the ground invasion is imminent.
Yeah, I mean, they've been mentioning this for days now. And what I think is terrible is how long it's taking for it to begin. I understand you have to get ready. You have to build field hospitals. You have to prepare. But it just pisses me off because I know the longer people go without food and water, the more, families are dying. And it's just it's painful. So, okay, just reading a little bit more about the Syrian airstrike. It looks like Israel is taking responsibility for these attacks. Here's the Jerusalem Post, for example. Israeli airstrikes targeting these international airports in Aleppo and Damascus. It does make you wonder if these are sort of like these preemptive strikes where you have Israel saying, look, don't mess with us while we're weak, and fighting down south, right? Because you have the Golan Heights. That's going to be your upper part of Israel, upper to the right, which is on the border of Syria. And then you're going to have, that's above the West Bank. And then you're going to have Lebanon to the left of that, basically right on top of Israel, which Donald Trump had some choice words for Israel as well. Those choice words or about the conflict can be listened to. Let's go grab that. Stand by. Here we go. Okay. Come on. Give me 1 second here. Rip. All right, I'll have to come back and circle back on the audio for that. I guess I can't get that audio functioning.
Most vulnerable spot. I said, wait a minute.
Well, I could do it that way. All right. Well, worst case scenario, we'll figure this out in just a moment. We'll do that worst case scenario. I'll play it up over here, and we'll get that audio from Donald Trump on Israel. If I can't get it open from there, we'll do it a different way. So we'll try one more time. Stand by. Okay. All right, no problem. We'll circle back to that. I'll get that audio going for you, and I'll be right back with that.
By the Biden administration, the senators released a statement saying the civilized world must reimpose serious consequences in the regime that aids and helps murderous evil against innocent Israelis. The U.S. must lead that effort by our example, and freezing Iranian assets is an important first step. Now, the Biden administration denies claims that any of the money recently unfrozen through that Iranian hostage exchange would have been used in this most recent attack on Israelis back on Saturday. However, again, there's still a lot of speculation about what's been happening behind the scenes. And in addition to that, we have seen some Democratic lawmakers who've had to react in real time to whether or not this should be done, whether this money should be refrozen, even though Iran says all this is going to be their money and they're going to be able to do with it what they will. Some Democrats say they're still unsure if it's going to even be possible to get that money back.
It's not actually that simple because it was part of a larger deal to get American hostages back. And I think actually it may be unconstitutional because it infringes on the president's ability to conduct foreign affairs without interference.
But what's fascinating here, within the last 24 hours or so, you have a number of Senate Democrats that are joining with Republicans saying they believe this money should be at least frozen temporarily until more information can be obtained. And Bill,
sorry about that. I totally think, by the way, that money should be frozen. You've got to send a strong message to Iran. But the problem with that is I don't think you're going to get that strong message sent to Iran because it would be Biden admitting that they made an oopsie doopsie. And I don't see that kind of admitting happening. Listening.
Tens of thousands of Israelis that have been moved out of these towns and kibbutzim that are located throughout this area, from Ashkelon down here to the southeast. The reason why is the Israeli military has moved in. Now, what about Gaza? You're going to hear an awful lot about this stretch of land on the eastern Mediterranean coast. You've got a border that runs about 24 miles along the coast that's been sealed off by the Israeli Navy. You have a border here in the Sinai with Egypt. And there's a town there called Rafah. Rafah is located about right here. We'll get into that a bit later this morning. It is a critical crossing point for anyone that wants to go into Gaza or out of Gaza. And the significance is coming up shortly here. The rest of it is about a 36-mile stretch that borders on Israel. Population here in Gaza, about 2 million. It's about twice the size of Washington, D.C., so it's not large.
Yeah, that border crossing, by the way, Egypt's president made it very clear that they're not interested in taking residents from Gaza. When they closed that border down previously, they noticed a precipitous drop in suicide bombings in Egypt once that border was sealed. There's some argument that potentially Egypt will be open to opening that border if they're provided with some kind of funding, maybe by the United States or otherwise. So we'll see. Let's keep listening here.
Anti-tank munitions, the rockets that can now reach Tel Aviv, and the tunnels that some estimate could be as long as 300 miles. John, how does this go?
It goes very destructively, and it's not just in this area, but even recent history of other missions like in Mosul against ISIS. Hamas has spent 9 years gathering rockets and all those munitions to turn this into a very costly operation that I think the IDF is still going to do. But Hamas, when I teach urban warfare, Hamas is the example I use of using human shields. Right now, we know we're in the air campaign where the IDF are engaging Hamas military targets because they too have been watching Gaza for 9 years, know where every Hamas military target is. But Hamas fills those targets with civilians and then airs their deaths in the attempt to make the IDF stop, make the international community, make the IDF step. But the IDF is going to move forward. They're going to face combat in hell, block by block, street by street, with enemy popping up from underneath hundreds of miles of tunnels, engaging them. But that rubble that's now there creates even more bunkers than they already have. And it's going to be costly, but the IDF can do it.
John, Dana Perino here. A question for you. Something that struck me last night reading Daniel Henninger in the Wall Street Journal. His piece was titled "Killing Civilians, the New Normal." It goes on to say that I want to emphasize these civilian deaths by Hamas in Israel and Russia in Ukraine are not collateral damage from urban warfare. They are part of the war plan, fought out by calm men sitting around a table in Moscow or Beirut, looking at maps and civilian targets. Are we in a new phase of warfare in the world with this?
Well, that's something that I believe as well, is that a lot of the leadership of Hamas isn't actually even over there. These are people who want to grow their power.
Do things to limit collateral damage that other militaries don't do. They'll call a building and say, hey, look, I'm getting ready to destroy this building. You have 10 minutes, get out. We don't do that. They have legal advisors in their command posts making a decision on, is this a valid military target?
John, let me just jump in. Dan Henninger was agreeing with you on that point. He was saying, though, that Hamas and the Russians are purposely targeting civilians in order to try to, I guess, either try to win, but also to demoralize the victims.
I think that's a very dangerous approach. I think that's a very dangerous approach. I think it's going to be costly, but the IDF can do it.
The Russians are purposely targeting civilians in order to try to, I guess, either try to win, but also to demoralize the victims.
Absolutely. I mean, Russia is a great example, and Hamas is where they use war crimes as their method of fighting and use civilian deaths to try to achieve their goals. 100%. And especially as the world is more urbanized, now they can do that more, right? Gaza is almost a completely urbanized area full of civilians that are trapped and not allowed to leave. It's a vile act, but I agree with you. As more urban warfare continues around the world, that becomes a new norm.
John, our U.S. Marines had this experience in Fallujah in Iraq. And wow, that was bloody and deadly, and it lasted for weeks. Do you think, A, the Israelis have made the decision to go in yet? Because there is some debate about that still. And also, what you write and talk about a lot when it comes to warfare like this is the will and the time. And if you could just tell our audience about what you mean by both of those elements.
Right. All war is a contest of will. The will of the soldiers to fight, their politicians to give them the objective, and the will of the populations to support their populations. In urban warfare, even the U.S. has seen this. If you remember the first Battle of Fallujah, where U.S. contractors were killed, the president made a decision, go and get the people that committed those crimes against U.S. citizens. But within 3 days, the international community urged the U.S. to stop because of the collateral damage. That element of time on the will to continue the operation. To answer your question, has the IDF made a decision? That's all signs that I can see, especially from what they're mobilizing and what their politicians have said, is that the mission is to go in to remove Hamas military capability from ever being able to do a vile act like this again. That requires saying, I hope Hezbollah doesn't attack. Way to that mission.
Well, it appears that both sides have the will. Right now.
All right. Right. Yeah. Look, Israel's going in. There's no way they're not. Right. I think I got this audio functioning, which is great. But yeah, they're going in. They're coming. Even if Kamala Harris says, do not come, they're coming. All right. Let's listen in here. Hopefully this isn't too loud. Let's see here if we can get good audio on this.
And then 2 nights ago, I read all of Biden's security people. Can you imagine? National defense people. And they said, gee, I hope Hezbollah doesn't attack from the north because that's the most vulnerable spot. I said, wait a minute. You know, Hezbollah is very smart. They're all very smart. The press doesn't like when they say it. You know, I said that President Xi of China, 1.4 billion people, he controls it with an iron fist. I said, he's a very smart man. They killed me the next day. I said he was smart. What am I going to say? But Hezbollah, they're very smart. And they have a national defense minister or somebody saying, I hope Hezbollah doesn't attack us from the north. So the following morning they attacked. They might not have been doing it, but if you listen to this jerk, you would attack from the north because he said that's. And then 2 nights ago, I read all of Biden's security people. Can you imagine?
There it is. That's Donald Trump telling the stories again. Hope they don't attack from the north. And keep in mind those strikes by Israel on Syrian airports might be a way to Lebanon to kind of send a signal of like, don't mess with us from the north. All right, let's keep listening in here.
A few moments ago, the UK government, Dana, announcing that flights to evacuate UK nationals from Israel, with the first flight leaving Tel Aviv today, are going to be happening. And then they're expecting to have all of those flights continue. As we know, so many people who were there were not able to get on those commercial flights. So now the government is stepping in as those people also wait to evacuate, Dana.
All right, Alexis McAdams, thank you for the update. We'll have breaking news from you throughout this hour in the day.
Yeah. So the Israeli president had a bit of a tense exchange with reporters during a press conference. We want to share this moment with you. He is considered to be mild-mannered as a leader, but watch his reaction to questions about the retaliatory strikes that are happening in Gaza.
He seemed to hold the people of Gaza responsible for not trying to remove
No, well, I'll
Hamas.
tell you.
Now, let me finish.
Do you
My
hold
question-
a missile in your kitchen, in your living room?
Can I ask my question?
A missile that is sent on our head here, and if there will be a siren, it's a missile from that kitchen. With all due respect, if you have a missile in your kitchen and you want to shoot it at me, am I allowed to defend myself? Yes.
No one
That's
is.
the
No one is.
situation.
But the question is this: ultimately, You can't remove the people of Gaza. They're going to be stuck in this neighborhood.
So we have to fight. What do you want us to do?
Well,
so we tell them, get out, and we fight against the launchers. We are fighting terror. Humanity has to decide, are we accommodating terror or are we fighting terror? We are fighting terror. I agree. There are many, many innocent Palestinians who don't agree to this. But unfortunately, in their homes, there are missiles shooting at us, at my children, at the entire nation of Israel. We have to defend ourselves. We have the full right to do so. And it's about time that the world understands it. This is the tragedy of using terror. And terror there's no mercy to terror.
He also called out media organizations during that moment, too. He wants all media organizations to label Hamas as a terrorist organization. Having spent a lot of time in that part of the world, a couple things come to mind. Even 20 years ago when Yasser Arafat was alive, and between the years 2000 and 2005, the biggest problem Israel had.
Interesting. Yeah, this is interesting. So according to the same Jerusalem Post, the reason for that strike in Syria may have actually been because there was an Iranian Mahan air flight that was about to land in Syria carrying weapons, potentially carrying weapons. I mean, they didn't know, but they've carried weapons in the past, as well as operatives or funds, and then they end up supporting Hezbollah. So there's this potential of funding or arming Hezbollah in the north, and Israel must have had a suspicion that more funding for Israel or weapons or soldiers or whatever were able to potentially come to Syria. And so by striking these two airports, they've forced these planes back to Iran, or at least this plane back to Iran. Question is, I mean, Iran could just drive it over theoretically, but I guess it buys Israel some time. It is interesting to see that intelligence, though. Again, it blows my mind that Israel's intelligence can determine that, which Iran's got to get over Iraq to get to Syria. So it'll probably take a little bit of a while. I mean, let's see here. Let's do, how long is it going to take me to drive from Iran to Damascus? It's going to take 23 hours. So yeah, I mean, it would be ideal to, and that'd be going through Baghdad, which, I mean, frankly, I don't know if I want to drive a car carrying weapons or trucks or whatever, a convoy or whatever, from Iran through Iraq to get to Syria. Even if I'm Iranian, like, I'm going to get picked off by the Taliban or some insurgents here are going to take all my weapons. So flying it in is probably the most useful. Now, there should be plenty of airports in Syria that can be used. I think this is a buy time plan for Israel. Let's see here. So as far as airports, well, there are a ton of them in Lebanon. Not that many of them actually show up in Syria. The next ones would be, it looks like a few hours away. If I go from here to Damascus, let's see here, we'd be about 3-hour drive away. I mean, see, that's probably the way to do it. You just have to land further up. All right, let's keep listening in here. Oh, okay, fine then. Let's flip. Let's see what Bloomberg has to say. We're about 9 minutes away from the market open. We'll see how the market reacts to this inflation data.
They're taking assets out of the capital structure and pledging that against new loans, which clearly lowers the default risk, but could potentially lower the recovery rate for the current levered loan holders. So, yeah, you have to be very selective in credit. It's a great time to be a lender given the pullback in bank lending activity.
Boring.
He killed one of the terrorists but got shot and ran away. I found him on Soroka Life, thank God, the policeman. 1 second, sorry.
Someone here in the comments says they do drive sometimes and they get hit in the Iraqi border from an unknown source. Yep.
Yes. And then there is this from the kibbutz Kfar Aza, where the IDF says women, children, toddlers, the elderly were brutally butchered. This is an open safe room in a home there. Bullet holes riddling the walls. Outside, body bags lined up. Israeli soldiers preparing to move those who were murdered. You can see a boot sticking out of one of the body bags. And this, we want to show you, is what has happened in the Israeli city of Ashkelon. People running for their lives as the sirens ring out, warning of incoming rocket fire from Gaza. A rocket hit a supermarket there. We do not know if anyone was injured or killed in that attack, but very clearly, what you see on that man's face, and you see so many other places, is just the terror inflicted on so many people. Again, what started as a terror attack by Hamas, a brutal, horrific terror attack, is now threatening to become a growing humanitarian crisis on both sides of the border.
All right, coming up, the White House is faced with the dilemma on how to respond to the atrocities, the things that you have been seeing with your own eyes in video that Kate has just described, without escalating the conflict further. Live pictures now out of Gaza City, you can see, or Gaza itself, you can see there have been strikes this morning, the smoke still billowing there, as we have seen just about every single day since this Hamas surprise attack occurred. We have more reporting for you ahead.
Quick follow-up here on the inflation data that we spoke about this morning. Thank you in the comments here for pointing this out. This is a tweet from Charlie. He puts his graphs are actually pretty decent, and I swear I mean, like, I take everything on Twitter with this massive grain of salt, and quite frankly, you should take everything with a grain of salt, right? It is not just Twitter. I mean, there's plenty of crap on YouTube too, but anyway. This is kind of just showing you, I like the graph here because you're using apartment list rather than Zillow. And it shows you rents stabilizing basically, right? This is the rent growth over time. Rents obviously still up about 20%, from before the pandemic. But what we care about is the stability. And so if we look at the year over year numbers, we would go down to about here on year over year, which means we're only just now starting to see declines in national rents. But if you go back another 6 months to here, you still have that increase. That increase right there from this part here to here, that fatness, that thick part right under there. If you can imagine a little line here, you know what? Let me do it for you, just to make it super, super simple for you to visualize. The difference between, so I'll give me a vertical line here. Give me an A. All right, we're going to go March of 22. Right there, the difference between this point. Let's go horizontal. I guess I could have done that one first. Here. Okay. That difference right here, this thickness under that blue line, that's what's keeping inflation reads hot right now. And once we actually start comparing from here over, then we'll actually you'll flip and you'll go negative. I mean, that'll just lead to rates plummeting basically, which is going to be fantastic. Hopefully, no guarantees. All right. We'll continue on with our discussion here on good old Israel-Palestine conflict, which is frustrating and terrible. We were waiting for this invasion to begin. A lot of talk about it, but so far no action just yet, other than airstrikes on commander bases and buildings.
Good morning, Dana. One of the things we're noticing out here is that fuel trucks are scrambling as the Israeli Defense Force is doing what it must do to supply this army that has now massed along the Gaza Strip. Overhead, I can hear drones operating, observing what is happening inside the Gaza Strip as all eyes are watching what happens next. And the Israeli Defense Force hints that the next phase is coming, hinting at a ground invasion. Meantime, we're getting some images with the aftermath of the airstrikes from the Gaza Strip. One of the things that is remarkable, images of ships burning in the port of Gaza. Remember, there was a naval component to this attack from Hamas on Israel. So this is the first time, anyway, that we have seen ships taking direct hit from Israeli airstrikes. As the airstrikes and the commando raids go into the Gaza Strip, the IDF is noting some of the progress they've made. Particularly, they've noticed the death of Mohammed Abu Shamla. They say that he was a naval operative for Hamas, and noted that naval equipment and underground commando equipment was taken from his possession. Also noted the fact that ISIS paraphernalia was taken from him and other operatives who have been killed along the Gaza Strip, as both the Israeli army and the Israeli government continue to make a connection between Hamas and ISIS. But we talk about the army amassing along the Gaza Strip. Really, it's the same sight that we see every day. The Merkava tanks, the howitzer cannons, the armored personnel carriers, and the infantry, all massing, waiting for their orders. And here, a little bit in the backdrop, we see all of the efforts to resupply them. Not getting resupplied is Gaza, the entire Gaza Strip and the 2.3 million in their population. And the Secretary of Energy here in Israel noted that the blockade of Gaza is absolute. He said that no light switch will be flipped, no hydrant will be turned on, and no fuel truck will enter the Gaza Strip until the Israeli hostages are released. Dana?
Mike Tobin, thank you. We'll be back in touch before the hour's out.
So, Dana with us in studio. Jay Johnson, former Homeland Security Secretary under President Obama. And sir, good morning to you.
90 seconds to market open.
I mean, just like maybe 35,000 foot level right now as you watch this conflict. What are we looking at here? What's to come?
Bill, I believe it's going to get worse before it gets better. I fear that this will be a protracted conflict. It looks as though Israeli ground forces are getting ready to go into Gaza. I thought that John Spencer's analysis of the situation was very astute. This is going to be urban warfare. Urban warfare, for anybody who has been in Iraq, anybody who's been in large cities in Afghanistan, Syria, knows that it is the type of combat that is the most fraught with danger for the forces, for the potential of collateral damage. On the other hand, I strongly suspect that Israeli intelligence, the IDF, have for years been studying the Gaza Strip and to understand every inch of that territory and probably know exactly where Hamas has, hunkered down, where they have military outposts. So I suspect the IDF knows what it's doing. They must have thought about this for years.
Come back.
They must have.
We got the opening bell to hit really quick, and then we'll go back to this discussion.
Great profile of what Exxon's doing all around the world, and that was a big part of the commentary from Woods yesterday.
Yes.
Jenny, Diana.
People should recognize that Pioneer did not have the technology to get to zero on its own. Scott Sheffield said a couple weeks ago they came to him. I've known Scott. Now, the one thing is that I introduced the new CEO on Mad Money, and he will not be the CEO. I was hoping that they get to the highest price that it's been. They did not. But Scott's a very earnest man, and I salute him for what he's done.
There you have it. Looks to be about 60% green. New York Times running a front page story yesterday, actually, that investors are betting the Federal Reserve may be done raising rates, especially following some of the commentary we've gotten from the Fed over the last few days, helping contribute to some of these pieces. This, by the way, I did also, thank you, JR, here, get the year-over-year chart. I actually don't think this chart on that CPI data we're talking about is as useful. It lets you visualize the year-over-year numbers, but it complicates the idea since we got to go back another 6 months, and it sort of complicates the comparison, in my opinion. But anyway, what you can see is what you want is year-over-year to be as low as possible, and the year-over-year change is actually turning negative only in the last 2 months here. So it'll take another 4 months potentially to really get some of those real negative numbers to pull through. Let's take a look just to see how the market is opening up. Some of the opening trades here. We've got opening trades on Tesla, first minute, 2 minutes here, pushing them up about 20 basis points. Enphase 127, Target up 3% at Target all of a sudden here. It somewhat implies we've got some news on TGT. Let's see what we've got. Target. Let's see what individual company news. Price target increased by B of A from 120 to 135. Target currently at 112. Price target bump on Target. Maybe you want to look at in the course member live stream later. Microsoft down 0.77 as they owe some back taxes. Still sitting there at 0.2 on Tesla. Rivian down 0.2. Dow's basically flat. Bitcoin 26.7. Carnival still at $12, down 1% today. Ford down about 3%. Lennar Homes down a couple percent. Nvidia up 20 basis points. And we have Ubiquity still sitting at 119. Pretty cheap for that one. Charge points down to $3. Probably deserved. And yeah. All right, we'll watch how the NASDAQ moves. NASDAQ, it's a little tough to tell which direction we want to go here. It does look like it's trying to push up. But at 19 bips, it's too soon to tell. We'll see how the markets move throughout the day. Let's listen back in to what we've got with Israel. When's this offensive going to start?
First, you're kind of pulling me back into my old job. My first thought is this. Americans, particularly in this area, New York City, there's a lot of concern. There's a lot of fear. We should not run and hide. New Yorkers in particular are tough, resilient people. The aim of the terrorist is to terrorize, to create fear and anxiety. The call by the former leader of Hamas for worldwide protest has created a lot of concern. I see it. I see it here in New York. And my advice is, let's not run and hide. Let's stay strong, always be vigilant. If you see something, say something. We have the benefit here in New York of being protected by the best police force in the nation. Their counterterrorism intelligence capabilities are as good as anything at the federal level. Now, as concerns the southern border, when I was secretary, we began an effort to more readily identify migrants of high concern before they even got close to the southern border, before they even reached this continent. We could very often, with the cooperation of our counterterrorism intel partners.
Quick mention here, the Financial Times has a great piece on what could be awaiting Israel. I personally am hoping that this will be very quick to minimize the pain to individuals, but obviously nobody knows exactly what's happening. Hamas is arguing that Israel should be prepared to expect everything, that this could be prolonged and painful, that Hamas will use its network of tunnels, nicknamed the Gaza Metro, to fire rockets on Israeli positions for as long as they possibly can. Israel's army, they say here, will deploy the doctrine of victory, which requires the Air Force to have a deep bank of pre-vetted targets destroyed in rapid order. It's already in play, with fighter jets intensely bombing large swaths of Gaza, pausing only to refuel, often in midair. The campaign is meant to outpace the ability of Hamas to regroup, and their goal is to basically achieve as much as they possibly can going into Gaza via the air first, before the ground invasion. And let's see what else here. The Financial Times piece is actually very interesting. I'll pull up some of the pictures that I have here. Preparing for urban warfare. We'll take a look at these. Some pictures of RPGs here. I'll pull these up in just a moment. We'll look at tunnels as well. Tunnels on average about 30 to 60 feet, 10 to 20 meters down. About 6 foot tall tunnels. Each tunnel can cost about $3 million to build. So far, there are apparently 1,370 tunnels that are expected. That's a lot of tunnels. Holy moly. I mean, this is going to be like underground trench warfare. Good Lord. Let's look at, here's some of the images from the Financial Times piece. So they're showing here an armored version of a caterpillar for clearing mines. and how they've installed a machine gun on top, armored cab. I'm pretty sure they put these racks over the side to limit rocket fire, so that way rockets don't explode on your cab, but they explode just outside it. Slat armor first added. Its main there it is. That's what they call it. They call it slat armor. Its main role is to counter rocket-propelled grenades and damaging them, preventing detonation. Really? Oh, that's interesting. You can actually prevent them from blowing up with this. What is it? Get stuck in between? Anyway, here's an example of a training center. Look at that. An army base 30 kilometers from the Gaza border. Here's Belida, a fake 5,000-acre town opened in 2005 to practice urban warfare. Oh, that's really interesting. That would be a sick paintball field. Not that we should be thinking about entertainment right now. But here they're calling it the Gaza Metro Tunnel Warfare. Tunnels into Israel discovered by the IDF during operations in July to August of 2014. These dotted red lines, you can see they're used to get into Israel as well. But, I mean, those would presumably have been sealed up. But the point is, if there are 1,300 of these tunnels, holy moly. Man, I want tunnels. I want tunnels under my house to, like, my office. That'd be cool. I'm going to dig down and build a tunnel from my office to my home. And then I don't have to go outside. You know, just tunnel between the two. That'd be funny. All right. So Israel's developed some of the most advanced urban warfare training in preparation for such conflicts. Oh, that training facility is an Israeli facility, by the way, that we saw. To be clear about that. Micro drones, attack helicopters will be used at the local level, the lower level, heavy mortars, machine guns, tank weapons, snipers, suicide bombers potentially await Israel. It's true. You got to deal with the suicide bombings again too. I think a lot of the Hamas individuals are going to be on a martyrdom goal.
What's happening at this moment? 4:38 in Gaza as our coverage continues.
The fact that we are here today and you have spoken as the President of the United States so clearly in support of Israel, so clearly in support of the Jewish people, what a dramatic distance we've traveled in these United States, how we as the Jewish community are blessed to live today in these United States.
Veteran homeowners need cash, but worried you can't.
Man, I hate ads. Well, the good news, though, is you can get a coupon on those crash courses on building your wealth that expires tomorrow by going to meetkevin.com and see all the other things meetkevin.com has to offer. Let's listen to it over here.
But they are saying that the decapitations happened as well as other, what they described as ISIS-style atrocities by Hamas militants as they attacked Israeli settlements. But what the authorities here in Israel are saying now is that, look, we're not going to confirm whether these people were men or women, whether they were soldiers or civilians, or whether they were adults or children. And so that's the clarification that's being given to us at this point, in this dreadful story. But I think we have to bear in mind that, of course, many children have been killed. The means by which they were killed is in some ways irrelevant, and that's what the Israeli government wants to do now, is focus on, that crime, that aspect of what's happened. And so, yes, a lot of confusion there, as you can imagine.
Pulling off that just for a moment here. Financial Times, this is breaking. IKEA returns to cutting furniture prices as inflation pressures ease. This is consistent with what I'm seeing almost across the board at retailers and service providers, not able to pass on higher costs anymore. Sales at IKEA increased 6.6%. However, now IKEA is forced to go again. Let's see here. During the pandemic, they were forced to go against lowering prices. But now we have lowered prices at the end of 23 and into 24. Supply costs started to come down for us. Let's go. That's great. They came into 2023 with higher prices than they wanted. And now prices are being cut to potentially stimulate growth again. That's fantastic. Boy, I love hearing that.
Should not, cannot, will not be lost in the telling of all of this. Thank you so much, Matthew.
All right, we're just getting some pictures in right now of Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit to Tel Aviv. These are live right now. He is being cheered by Israelis there. You can't see Blinken in this frame, I don't think, but he, we are told, is delivering some kind of supplies, there he is.
Money bags.
In there. And looks, Antony Blinken has got a, let me listen.
For more than 20 years.
We saw it. We saw it.
Mr. Secretary, how did you feel about this?
It's wonderful to see this.
I think you're seeing some of the humanitarian supplies there in the camera being moved just for a second. We'll try to listen in once he gets settled and set. Here, there he goes.
All right, I thought he was going to take some questions there. It would have been good to listen in, and we still will try. But what's interesting here, again, just not an inch of space at this moment between the United States and Israel in this conflict.
Nice to see you.
This is my father, Eitan.
Good to meet you.
We are survivors from the music rave. We were lots of friends. Yes, we lost a lot of our friends, close friends, and lots of family members. There are a lot of people that we know that are kidnapped and now in Gaza. We went through horror, really. I'm 24, and I never imagined something like this would happen ever in a dance and a music festival. We celebrated love, and we danced, and it was amazing. And then the rockets started and gunshots everywhere. We managed to escape, but there are a lot of friends that didn't, and there are a lot of friends that are kept captive now in Gaza. And we were saved by miracle, but there are friends that we love that aren't. Thank you for being here. It's really important. And if there's any way to help, first priority are our friends and family that are now in Gaza. We're strong here, we're powerful here, in this place, now in Tel Aviv and everywhere.
Pretty intense.
Thank you very much.
We're thinking of them and trying to do everything we can.
I know.
We want to bring them home.
Thank you so much.
I mean, I hate to take the jaded POV, but I wonder, the Israelis probably, and any country would have to do this, is who can we get that's going to be the most emotional to put that presentation on for Blinken? And it's honest, it's sincere, right? But you got to pick somebody who can actually talk too. So it's got to be orchestrated to some extent as well. Again, I'm not saying it's not real, but it's an interesting foreign policy idea. It's okay, we're going to have to set this up, put the show on for Blinken so he really takes care of us and gives us more weapons and money. That makes sense.
An emotional moment there. Extremely touching, where you have these two were at that music festival on the border. You can just hear the sorrow. She got a chance to speak with the Secretary of State as he goes to visit the airport.
All right, let's flip for a moment here.
Here on the road, and that stopped all traffic from escaping to the south. A similar situation happened in the north as well.
Sammy Lee says, LOL, Kevin, not everything is staged. I'm not saying it's staged. I said orchestrated. We know Blinken's going to be at a certain location. So what are we going to have there? Well, we're going to have the media there. If you have a press conference and the media sets up cameras, is that staged? No, it's prepared, right? You orchestrate. Okay, first we're going to do this. Then they're going to walk around and we're going to want them to talk to actual people who were there. Okay, let's have this person there or this person there or whatever, right? That's the way it works.
Independent 2024 hopeful Cornel West in his defense of the Palestinians.
Hamas is the ones responsible for the killing of Palestinian children.
Same outrage when... Is it plural, though? I don't know. It ends with an S. Maybe it's a single group. I don't know. Actually, that's interesting.
Have the same indignation when Palestinians are killed.
Not when they're killed by Palestinians. You can't make a moral comparison when Nazi kids were killed in the bombings of Dresden. I didn't have the same comparison when Jewish kids were put in gas chambers and crematoriums. You're a professor of theology. Don't you understand the moral difference between deliberately murdering a kid and having collateral damage because there are human shields?
And that human shield point is a very good one, right? So they would, the parents of Gaza no doubt love their children, right? But they are also using willing in some cases to use them as human shields and then to use them as propaganda, so that you end up having media organizations and leftists on college campuses saying this is so horrible and the Israelis are extracting revenge and shouldn't they just back off? And I think the answer from the Israelis is going to be, and you saw it from President Herzog of Israel, the answer is no, they're going to fight back.
And one thing to keep in mind is previously you had Israel's policy against Hamas deemed mowing the lawn. This is per Bloomberg. They would call it mowing the lawn. And mowing the lawn was a practice of going into Gaza after Gaza, Hamas would attack Israel and the Iron Dome would defend when possible. They would go in and surgically strike, unfortunately kill a lot of people, whether it was through direct military action, collateral damage, whatever. And then they'd go back to Israel. Now what we're planning for is a full-scale invasion. Very, very different. It's like, forget about mowing the lawn. We're going to go remove it.
And the last 2 days and his meeting with you yesterday was well received and welcomed. Maybe get your take on that meeting. Did you feel that you got what you needed out of that particular meeting?
Yes, good morning. I'm pleased to be with you, although it's under terrible circumstances. You know, the most important thing the president did yesterday in his meeting with us as American Jewish community leaders and the day before was a clear statement of moral clarity that Hamas is evil.
We know.
24-year-old woman who had been at the music festival sobbing, saying, "Thank you for being here," which is a message just bigger than one person right now.
We've heard it.
In Arizona, like Danae here.
Yep, I'm definitely a real person.
Yeah, sure you are.
Perspective, as always, it always is. I want to start with Bank of America. Shanali talked about it. The underperformance there has been absolutely dreadful.
Boring.
Looking at moves 20% lower. Erica, what explains that move? What is the market seeing that you don't quite agree with?
Doomberg.
To intercede against the evil that Nazi Germany was perpetrating against Jews at the time, and they could not get a meeting with President Roosevelt. They were turned away and were not allowed to see him. And what a contrast it is that we were invited into the White House to meet with President Biden, and he, to his credit, made the right and clear moral statement, and we appreciate his leadership.
Right now, we're showing on screen, Nathan, Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, is in Tel Aviv. He flew there yesterday. He had the meeting today with Benjamin Netanyahu in a press conference. He's now visiting a donation site, which is helping to get supplies and information. You can hear them there thanking him for being there. No doubt, as you're talking about, the solidarity and the show of support means a lot. I want to ask your help in helping us explain to others, especially maybe those on college campuses or those hearing from their friends on social media, things that is against Israel that they don't quite understand. A couple of statistics here call for number one, that Jewish people account for only 2.4% of the U.S. population. They face more than 50% of religiously motivated hate crimes. That's the most of any other group. And Barry Weiss was on America's Newsroom earlier this week, just trying to explain her perspective on it that is helpful. But I want to get yours as well. Listen to her here.
But this is different. What has happened over the past 72 hours is the biggest slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. In this case, with Hamas in 2023, they are live streaming their atrocities on TikTok. They're filming them with sophisticated drones. They're gleefully and proudly showing the extent of their barbarism. What this is a massacre being live streamed in real time.
And so, Nathan, can you help others understand this, especially on college campuses? What can we do to help try to turn around a terrible trend?
I think it's not only a teaching of Judaism, but of many faiths. We send our kids to school, but the children's best teachers are their parents. And I think parents, whether your child is a small child going off to kindergarten or going off to university, parents can play a critical role in talking to their children about the basics of what's right and what's wrong in this world. That's every parent's responsibility. And we've seen in a variety of ways in recent years in which American parents have learned to not fully outsource the education of their children to others. Most parents in America have good values, have Judeo-Christian values, and they need to engage with their children, and there are lots of resources to help them engage with their children. So that's where I would start.
Okay.
There's big news for women going through menopause. Vioza, a prescription treatment.
Oh, man. Okay.
Carrying tiki torches gathered to protest the removal of a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee while chanting, "Jews will not replace us." The next day, counter-protesters arrived, and that's when things turned deadly. A rally participant drove his car through the group.
All right. Yeah, this is getting a little nonsensical, some of this. We want to stick to the news here. So it's worth noting that right now there have been 97 people identified as being held hostage by Hamas. Social media videos are showing that these include elderly, they include children, men, women. Israel's ambassador to the UN said there were between 100 to up to 150 hostages. Hamas argues they have dozens. 97 have been identified. Israel airstrikes obviously increase the potential risk for the hostages. They're believed to be about 20 American hostages. And that's where we're getting family pressure from obviously individuals to try to go rescue these hostages. But they're still trying to match up potential blood found at the sites of some of these war zones to determine, are they potentially still alive? Because if you find blood but you don't find a body, maybe there's a suggestion that they're still alive. Pretty terrible. Delta is trimming its 2023 outlook, but they did end up beating as they reported earnings. 603 was the expectation. They're guiding 6 to 625. First major carrier to report as it benefited from international travel and summer travel, but fuel prices wrecked them a bit. Interesting. See how Delta's moving. Stock market slightly lower now as you're getting some reaction to super core inflation potentially as high as 0.6%. Now, this is different from looking at, core excluding housing, which would be goods and services coming in at 0.07%, which is really low, less than 0.1. If you just look at services, not including goods, and you exclude housing, you can see we're at 0.61. This is pretty high. Highest level that we've really seen since about August of 2022. Some are saying this particular chart here, if this repeats itself next month, could lead the Fed to argue, all right, higher for longer. It truly is. We'll see. Stock's slightly red on the back of this. And actually all indices now red. And you've got the 10-year Treasury up about 4.4 basis points, 2 years up 7.2.
They went to court, went to trial and opted to retell and relive that trauma in order.
Which joined a NATO summit for the first time as an ally. Let me urge all of our allies to support the immediate accession of Sweden, which is both a proud democracy and a highly capable defense partner. Vilnius was a watershed for NATO's collective deterrence and defense. Our leaders endorse NATO's new family of regional defense plans, and that will significantly improve our ability to deter and defend against any threat. We also established a new multinational and multi-domain allied reaction force. This new force will provide more response options to threats and crises.
That's Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. He is in Brussels today, but he will be in Israel tomorrow. So Secretary of State there today, Secretary of Defense tomorrow, and I'm sure that the Israelis feel like they are being well supported by the American administration.
A lot to track on this, and I agree with that entirely. It appears that based on the international response, the U.S. has taken the lead. I think the president's been strong for 2 days at the White House. We want to keep it that way. And Israel needs to know that I think it was Blinken said, as long as you're here, we'll be here. To paraphrase his comment from earlier today. We have some breaking news, Dana, however, on the death toll in this war, and Alexis McAdams has more on that. She's in our newsroom here in New York. Alexis.
Hi, Bill. Yeah, those new numbers from the Gaza Health Ministry have just come in a short time ago. They're now reporting that more than 1,400 Palestinians have been killed and more than 6,000 were wounded in Israeli airstrikes since Saturday. Those numbers do continue to ebb and flow. Israel, though, reporting at least 1,200 people have been killed in Hamas attacks since Saturday after that horrible tragedy that all started at the music festival. And we also know at least 25 Americans have been killed as their stories continue to come out and their pictures as their families are grieving. Videos in the aftermath that we've been seeing all across social media and here on the network show that people were brutally murdered inside of their own homes. We saw Trey Yingst going into some of those houses and some of those villages, Bill and Dana. Hamas holding as many as 150 people hostage in the Gaza Strip, according to Israeli authorities. America working hard to try and get those hostages out safely as their families continue to call for help. Back to you.
Wow, look at this. This is intense. So you remember back, well, maybe you don't, but I mean, just remember the history of it. Nagasaki and Hiroshima, the dropping of nuclear bombs, killing a lot of people instantaneously, many more to devastating cancers and otherwise. And what do we have after that? We have the history that, at least this is what's suggested by history books, although whether it happened or not, some people dispute. But there was this suggestion that leaflets were dropped by America saying, we're targeting 8 different cities. We won't strike all of them, but we will start striking them. We encourage you to leave. Okay. Look at what we have now. Israel dropping leaflets warning Gaza residents to take shelter. Leaflet being dropped in a city in Gaza Strip. And of course, it says, because of Hamas's actions, the Israeli Defense Force is taking action. The leaflet warns residents to go to shelters and says buildings where Hamas are operating will be destroyed. This is highly anticipated that Israel is going to make a very clear argument that, hey, Hamas attacked us. If we destroy your home, it's not our fault. It's Hamas's fault. So hate them, not us. This is part of psychological warfare to prevent further attacks in the future, and and you do that by encouraging the population to stand against these sort of violent factions. Though the odds are there are going to be plenty of people who are just even more angered at Israel because of the attack that's coming. So fascinating piece though here. Keep listening in. Strikes a bit earlier today hit the airports in Damascus and Aleppo that damaged runways and put them out of service. Our Trey Yingst reporting that Iran uses those airports to smuggle weapons to Hezbollah that eventually make their way into Lebanon.
Former Defense Secretary Bob Gates will be joining us in a moment.
But first, on the ground, Trey Yingst. Trey, if you feel comfortable, where are you and where are you going?
Bill, Dana, good morning. Right now, we're with the Israeli military and a group of journalists headed to a location. I'll tell you more about that later today. It is certainly sensitive as it lies in the area where there is activity going on. This entire part of southern Israel is bracing for days and days of fighting to come. And just to give you a sense of what it's like here this morning, we saw earlier as a rocket came off the Gaza Strip. One rocket was intercepted by Israel's missile defense system, the Iron Dome, and another slammed into the city of Sderot, right next to a center for medics. Multiple people were injured in Sderot, and when we got to the scene, you could see a hole in the ground and shrapnel on the side of a building, pieces of metal everywhere on the floor, and also blood, a pool of blood. Someone was injured there in moderate condition and taken to a local hospital. That's just one scene of many. And again, those are the attacks from the air. On the ground, a soldier just told us about an hour ago they were worried about an infiltration attempt along the border. And we do know that early this morning, Hamas tried to fire an anti-tank missile at a house just north of Gaza in southern Israel. So there's a lot of activity and a lot of movement going on here. And the Israelis continue each and every hour to prepare for an eventual ground operation. I do, Bill, want to talk about that situation in Syria. It's the first time since this war began and this massacre on Saturday morning that we've seen the Israelis strike positions in Syria deep into Syria. We're talking about the airport in Aleppo and the airport in Damascus. I want to take our viewers back a few years, some of the reporting I did with my producer here. And we spoke with Western intelligence sources who gave us some information on the types of weapons that are being smuggled to those airports. The Iranian regime is smuggling precision-guided munitions to that airport in Damascus and also the airport in Aleppo. And then they take the weapons into Lebanon, to the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. Now, what have we seen this week? Hezbollah trying to get involved in the fight here in the south. They're taking on the northern border. They fired rockets. They fired an anti-tank missile at a group of soldiers, and they've set off air raid sirens throughout the northern part of this country. It is why Israel is bracing for the possibility of a multi-front conflict, because if the rocket fire continues from Gaza, and they're engaged on the ground here behind me, and they're fighting a war with the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah that has thousands of precision-guided missiles that have been smuggled from Iran, we're looking at a very, very serious situation, and Israel's air defense capabilities are not that advanced where they could handle that much fire at one time. Bill, Dana?
Okay, Trey, thanks. Trey Yinks will be back with you when possible.
And that's something we covered earlier about this potential for Iran to use other airports or to potentially through Iraq drive weapons in, although that's very dangerous as they can then be struck or robbed by other, militant groups, whatever, or even America and the CIA, who knows? Point is, though, we've got, this situation expanding and this invasion probably starting within the next few days. We'll see.
Arming and training Hamas for this. I think Iran's strategic interest in this is reversing the trend toward reconciliation between Israel and the Arab states, in particular, the U.S. brokered attempt at reconciliation between Israel and Saudi Arabia. So, one of the things that polls show is that while Arab governments are in favor of strengthening the relationship openly with Israel, the Arab street is not. And so I think the longer this goes on, the more likely it is you'll see protests in the streets of a number of Arab capitals, and that will put pressure on these governments to slow this reconciliation process, and that's a win for Iran.
Wow.
All right. Well, with that said, I've got to get to the course member live stream. Thank you all so much for being here. Check out the new Pro courses. Prices go up tomorrow on those. Even if you just get one of them, get in, feel it, taste it. It's a really good price. Go to meetkevin.com. A lot of really good information from how to make more money at your job, invest in real estate, invest in stocks, speak with more confidence, learn how to sell anything to anyone. These are great. They're all going to be brand new content. And while we have mentioned stocks in this video, keep in mind this video is not intended or believed to be reasonably sufficient information to complete an investment into any securities I mentioned. A lot of the securities I talk about, we also own, so keep that in mind. And we're not short any positions right now. So go check out the actively managed ETF, the real estate startup, licensed financial advice. They're all linked at the top at meetkevin.com. The real estate startup is a house hack, but you can see that linked at the top as well. And none of this is intended to be personalized financial advice. And we'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much. Goodbye and stay safe out there.